Young Sheldon was supposed to answer the questions the Big Bang Theory left behind. Instead, it created a new set of questions. Across 7 seasons, the prequel changed details fans had accepted for years. Some were small continuity issues, while others completely changed how we viewed the Cooper family. From Sheldon's childhood bully, who barely acted like a bully, to his father, who may never have cheated at all. The more young Sheldon expanded the universe, the more it seemed to contradict the show it was meant to support. Today we're breaking down the biggest continuity problems between the two series, starting with one that changes how we understand Sheldon's own memories. According to the Big Bang Theory, Billy Sparks was one of the biggest villains of Sheldon's childhood. Adult Sheldon described him as the neighborhood bully, claiming Billy shoved a Mexican peso up his nose and smeared dog poop on his bicycle handlebars. If you only knew Billy from Sheldon's stories, you would imagine someone who spent years making his childhood miserable. But when young Sheldon introduces Billy, that image quickly begins to fall apart. At first, the show seems to set him up as exactly the person Sheldon described. In the pilot, Billy scares Sheldon with one of his chickens and calls him a doofus.
Hey, doofus!
Later, the Sparks family's eggs are connected to the Cooper family's salmonella outbreak, and Sheldon even claims in a school assignment that Billy threw a chicken at him. However, as the series continues, Billy becomes almost the opposite of the bully Sheldon remembered. Instead of being cruel, he is shown as a harmless and often confused kid. He joins Sheldon and Tam for Dungeons and Dragons, helps during Sheldon's paper route, and eventually receives tutoring from Sheldon to help him pass a test. By the final seasons, Billy and Missy are even friendly enough to spend time together at the Cooper house. This version of Billy is completely different from the childhood enemy Sheldon described for years. The simplest explanation is that Sheldon might have exaggerated in his stories in the Big Bang Theory. The final episode reveals that young Sheldon is presented as a memoir written by adult Sheldon, meaning the events are filtered through his memories. It is possible that Billy scared Sheldon a few times as a child, but those moments became bigger over time until Sheldon remembered him as a lifelong tormentor. And if Sheldon remembered Billy differently than he actually was, it raises a bigger question. What if other people from his childhood were also remembered differently? Because the next contradiction involves the biggest accusation Sheldon ever made about his own father. Long before young Sheldon existed, the Big Bang Theory had already created a very different image of George Cooper Sr. Whenever Sheldon talked about his father, it was rarely positive. George was described as a heavy drinker who struggled to understand his son, constantly argued with Mary, and most importantly, cheated on his wife. Those stories became so accepted that when CBS announced a prequel about Sheldon's childhood, most fans weren't wondering if George's affair would happen. They were wondering when. Then, young Sheldon introduced George. From the beginning, this version of George felt completely different. He was far from perfect. He drank more than he should, struggled financially, and had a difficult relationship with Sheldon. His marriage with Mary also became increasingly complicated over time. But the show revealed something the Big Bang Theory rarely showed. George cared about his family. He supported Georgie when others doubted him, understood Missy better than almost anyone, and often found practical ways to help Sheldon when logic couldn't solve a problem. He wasn't the perfect father, but he was a man trying to keep his family together. As the series continued, George became one of the most respected characters in the show. That created a major problem. The more audiences connected with this version of George, the harder it became to imagine him becoming the man Sheldon had described for years. Instead of immediately showing George's affair, the writers introduced his friendship with Brenda Sparks. At first, their relationship seemed harmless. They talked at the bar, shared frustrations about their marriages, and found comfort in having someone outside their families who understood their struggles. For nearly 2 seasons, the show built that expectation. Every interaction between George and Brenda seemed like it was preparing to reveal one of the biggest moments from the Big Bang Theory. But season 7 completely changed the story. Instead of revealing that George cheated, the show revealed that Sheldon had misunderstood what he saw. Mary planned to surprise George by dressing in a a German beer maid outfit. Unfortunately, Sheldon walked into his parents' bedroom at exactly the wrong moment. He saw a woman he didn't recognize, immediately closed the door, and for the rest of his life, he believed he had witnessed his father with another woman. But the woman he saw was his mother, Mary. That reveal completely changed one of the biggest parts of Sheldon's backstory. His famous 3-knock habit still makes sense because he genuinely believed he experienced something traumatic. The difference is that George wasn't hiding an affair. Sheldon had simply misunderstood what he saw. This also changes how audiences view George Cooper. For years, fans only knew him through stories told by Sheldon and Mary, two people who naturally remembered him through their own experiences. Sheldon often struggled to understand emotions, while Mary spent years dealing with the frustrations of their marriage and later the pain of losing him. Young Sheldon gave viewers a perspective they never had before. Instead of an uncaring father, George becomes a flawed but loving parent who tried to support his family despite his mistakes. He wasn't perfect, but he was the person who often held the Cooper family together when everything started falling apart. The interesting thing is that The Big Bang Theory never spent much time developing Georgie. For years, audiences only knew him through Sheldon's perspective, and that perspective was not exactly flattering. Sheldon described his older brother as unintelligent, annoying, and someone who constantly picked on him. Whenever Georgie was mentioned, he was usually the joke. That changed when adult Georgie finally appeared in season 11 of The Big Bang Theory. Instead of the irresponsible brother Sheldon described, viewers met someone successful, confident, and surprisingly mature. More importantly, Georgie revealed something Sheldon rarely acknowledged. After George died, Mary struggled emotionally. Missy was still young, and Sheldon left Texas to continue his academic career. Someone had to stay behind and keep the family together. According to Georgie, that person was him. It became one of the most important moments in the franchise because it changed how viewers saw Sheldon's older brother. Georgie wasn't just the sibling who teased Sheldon. He was the person who sacrificed his own future to support the family. When young Sheldon began, fans expected the series to eventually explain how Georgie became that person. Instead, it completely changed how audiences viewed him. The prequel turned Georgie from a background character into one of the emotional centers of the show. His story became less about being Sheldon's less intelligent brother and more about a young man finding his own path. After leaving high school, Georgie discovered he had a natural talent for business. While he didn't have Sheldon's academic abilities, he understood people and knew how to create opportunities. His life changed even more after meeting Mandy. Their relationship forced Georgie to grow up quickly. After Mandy became pregnant with their daughter Cece, he went from an irresponsible teenager to someone trying to provide for his family and earn the respect of those around him. By the final season, Georgie and Mandy were married, completing a journey that made his future in The Big Bang Theory feel much more believable. The prequel also explains smaller details about Georgie. Adult Georgie speaks differently from his teenage self, but young Sheldon shows that he intentionally works on the way he talks because he wants to become a better example for his daughter. It is a small detail, but it shows how the writers tried to connect both versions of the character. Ironically, the more young Sheldon developed Georgie's story, the stranger Sheldon's version of him became. After seeing everything Georgie sacrificed, it becomes difficult to understand why Sheldon rarely mentioned his brother's role in keeping the family together. Instead, he mostly remembered him as the brother who bullied him. Once again, the prequel leaves viewers with the same question. Did Georgie really change? Or did Sheldon simply never understand him until much later? And that same idea continues with another person from Sheldon's past. Because according to The Big Bang Theory, Tam betrayed Sheldon in one of the biggest ways possible. But young Sheldon tells a very different story. For someone who only appeared a few times, Tam became responsible for one of Sheldon's longest-running grudges. When Tam appears in The Big Bang Theory, Sheldon acts as if he is meeting someone who committed an unforgivable betrayal. According to Sheldon, the two had planned to move to California together when he left for Caltech. Tam was supposed to become his roommate, But at the last moment, he stayed in Texas, got married, and started a family. Sheldon viewed that decision as a personal betrayal and refused to speak to him for more than 20 years. It was exactly the kind of extreme reaction fans expected from Sheldon. However, when young Sheldon reaches its final season, that story becomes much less clear. Instead of showing two friends making a life-changing promise, the prequel shows a much quieter goodbye. Sheldon is focused on his future at Caltech, while Tam understands that their lives are moving in different directions. Before leaving, Sheldon asks Tam to have one final lunch together, and their conversation feels less like a friendship ending through betrayal, and more like two people accepting that things are changing. There is no major argument, no emotional fallout, and no moment where Tam clearly promises he will follow Sheldon to California. That creates the contradiction. The Big Bang Theory presents the story as if Tam broke a promise, but young Sheldon never shows that promise being made. A possible explanation is that Sheldon simply assumed Tam would follow him without Tam ever agreeing to it. If that is true, then the entire situation changes. Tam did not abandon Sheldon. Sheldon expected something that was never guaranteed. And that actually fits Sheldon's personality throughout both shows. He often assumes other people see situations the same way he does, then becomes frustrated when they make different choices. What Sheldon viewed as a betrayal may have simply been a normal life decision that he interpreted personally. Once again, the prequel changes the meaning of a story without directly saying the Big Bang Theory was wrong. It also raises another question. How many other childhood memories did Sheldon unintentionally change over time? But while Tam's story can be explained as a misunderstanding, the next contradiction is harder to ignore, because this time, it is not about how Sheldon remembers people. It is about where he actually grew up. For almost the entire run of young Sheldon, the Cooper family's life revolves around Medford, Texas. That is where their home is, where Sheldon attends school, where Mary goes to church, where George coaches football, and where most major events in the series happen. If young Sheldon was the only show in the franchise, viewers would assume Medford had always been the Cooper family's hometown. But the Big Bang Theory suggests something different. Throughout the series, Sheldon connects several childhood memories to Galveston. He says he was born there, remembers visiting Baybrook Mall as a child, and mentions experiences that suggest Galveston was an important part of his early life. When young Sheldon began, the show did not immediately explain this difference. It simply presented the Coopers as a family that had always lived in Medford, creating another continuity issue. Eventually, the writers attempted to fix it. Season 2 reveals that George Sr. previously coached football in Galveston. After exposing a recruiting scandal, he lost his job and struggled to find another coaching position nearby, forcing the family to move to Medford. The explanation works on the surface. It explains why Sheldon and Missy were born in Galveston, but grew up elsewhere. However, it creates another question. When exactly did the family move? The timeline is never fully explained. That matters because the Big Bang Theory claims Billy Sparks bullied Sheldon when he was very young. If Billy was already living next door in Medford, then the Coopers had to move there before Sheldon turned 5. But young Sheldon never gives a clear answer. It is a small detail compared to the bigger changes in the franchise, but it represents a pattern throughout the prequel. Every time young Sheldon fixes one contradiction, another seems to appear. And nowhere is that more obvious than in Sheldon's education. If there is one thing both shows agree on, it is that Sheldon Cooper was an extraordinary genius. His intelligence shaped his entire childhood and eventually led him to Caltech. However, while both series agree on where Sheldon ends up, they tell very different stories about how he got there. Throughout the Big Bang Theory, Sheldon casually mentions parts of his academic history. When those details are combined, they create a simple timeline. He claims he skipped ahead, entered college at 11 years old, graduated by 14, and earned his doctorate at 16. It is an unbelievable achievement, but it fits the image of Sheldon that fans knew. The timeline seems simple. Finish elementary school, skip the normal school experience, go directly to college, then continue toward becoming a scientist. Then young Sheldon changes everything. Instead of sending Sheldon straight from elementary school to university, the prequel shows him attending Medford High School at only 9 years old. He shares classrooms with teenagers, walks the same halls as Georgie, and struggles to fit into an environment designed for students much older than him. It introduces an entire part of his life that the Big Bang Theory never mentioned. At the same time, the writers try to connect both versions of the story. Sheldon begins taking college-level classes at East Texas Tech, allowing him to study advanced physics while still technically remaining a high school student. The show creates a middle ground. Sheldon is intelligent enough for university-level work, but he is still a child experiencing normal life. That continues for several seasons. When Sheldon finally graduates high school, the moment is treated less as an academic achievement and more as an emotional challenge. For the first time, Sheldon is not worried about science or solving problems. He is afraid. Leaving Texas means leaving behind everything familiar. Despite his intelligence, he is still a child facing a major change. Missy is the one who helps him understand that feeling nervous is normal. It is one of the most human moments in young Sheldon, but it also highlights another difference between the two shows. Adult Sheldon rarely talks about these experiences. After graduation, the prequel spends several seasons showing his journey through college, including his struggles, research opportunities, and relationships with his professors. Young Sheldon turns his education into a detailed storyline, while The Big Bang Theory made it sound almost effortless. The destination remains the same. Sheldon eventually reaches Caltech and becomes the scientist fans know. The difference is the journey. And that matters because education is not just another part of Sheldon's life. It explains why he struggled socially, why his family made sacrifices for him, why he left home earlier than his siblings, and how he became the person audiences met in The Big Bang Theory. Changing that timeline changes how viewers understand his childhood. But the biggest contradiction of all combines Sheldon's education, George's death, Germany, and tornado into a timeline that still does not completely fit together. Out of all the contradictions between The Big Bang Theory and young Sheldon, this is one of the hardest to explain, because the problem existed before the prequel even began. In season 1 of The Big Bang Theory, Sheldon recalls being 15 years old while studying at the University of Heidelberg in Germany. He says his mother had to return to Texas because a tornado damaged their family home, leaving George behind to deal with the aftermath. The memory seems very specific. Sheldon gives his age, mentions Germany, remembers the tornado, and most importantly, George Cooper is still alive. The problem is that throughout The Big Bang Theory, Sheldon repeatedly says his father died when he was 14. Those two events cannot both be completely accurate. If George died when Sheldon was 14, he could not have been alive in Texas dealing with the tornado while Sheldon was supposedly 15 and studying in Germany. The contradiction already existed long before young Sheldon aired. The prequel tried to connect the two stories by moving the Germany trip earlier. Near the end of season 6, Sheldon receives a research opportunity at the University of Heidelberg, and Mary travels with him while George stays home with Georgie and Missy. While Sheldon is away, a tornado hits Medford and destroys Mima's house. The family deals with the damage while Sheldon and Mary remain in Germany, eventually leading to Mima moving in with the Coopers. On the surface, it looks like the writers successfully connected the two shows. The Germany trip is explained. The tornado is explained. George being alive is explained. But one detail does not match: Sheldon's age. In young Sheldon, he is 13 during the Germany storyline, not 15. Moving the trip earlier fixes one problem, but creates another. Shortly afterward, season 7 reaches one of the most emotional moments in the series. George receives an opportunity to coach football at Rice University, and for the first time in a long time, the family appears to be entering a better chapter. Then everything changes. The Cooper family receives devastating news. George has suffered a fatal heart attack.
Where's George?
He had a heart attack.
He's okay, right?
He's gone.
Sheldon is 14 years old. That moment finally matches one of the biggest facts from the Big Bang Theory. George dies when Sheldon is 14. However, the Germany timeline still does not match. Now, Sheldon was 13 during an event he later remembered happening at 15. Some fans believe the explanation comes from the final episode of Young Sheldon, which reveals that the entire story is being written as a memoir by adult Sheldon. Because the events are filtered through his memories, it is possible that he simply remembered certain details incorrectly. And that explanation actually changes the way we view every contradiction between the two shows. Maybe Billy was never the lifelong bully Sheldon remembered. Maybe Tam never truly betrayed him. Maybe George never cheated. Maybe Georgie deserved more recognition than Sheldon gave him. Instead of being simple continuity mistakes, these differences can be viewed as different versions of the same childhood, shaped by imperfect memories and personal perspectives. That is what makes Young Sheldon so interesting. It does not just expand the world of the Big Bang Theory. It questions whether every story Sheldon told was completely accurate in the first place. That is why these contradictions continue to divide fans. Some see them as mistakes the writers never fully solved, while others see them as changes that gave the Cooper family more depth. Either way, one thing is clear. By the time Young Sheldon ended, it had done more than expand the universe of the Big Bang Theory. It completely changed the way many fans viewed it.